and someone next to you has this book, I want you to touch the book, okay? So, the reason I want you to touch the book and hold the book, just feel the energy coming from the book and become a part of the book, okay? He has a lot of great information, so anyway, it works. Anyway, I'm happy to see you, and I saw you, and you're so cute and adorable and just full of life, and so I was like, oh my God, I love your name too. I forgot what it was.
Bo-Yi.
Bo-Yi.
Bo-Yi. Bo-Yi. B-O capital I-E.
Bo-Yi.
Okay, I love it.
Yes.
All right, thanks for being here. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and before I get started, I wanted to give honors to someone that is on Professor Spira's program and has been for a while. Now, I've seen some amazing things happen. So that's why I'm going to have her come up here for about 2 minutes and just tell her experience. But before I do, I want to let you know what I seen. She had moles on her back. This person, I won't say her name yet, but I look at her. So all eyes on you. Anyway, I see moles on her back. And she's had them for a long time because she had different habits coming up like we all did, eating a lot of sugar and what have you. So it causes havoc on your body. And her body, lots of moles. So when she got on the program, and I don't know how long it took, but maybe about a year or so, one day she showed me her moles. She said, I think my moles are coming off. And so I looked at her back, and I remember how her back looked with the moles. And sure enough, the moles were coming off her back, and I seen the little indentation where the moles had been, and it was amazing. And it didn't leave a scar. They pretty much meshed into her skin. You could tell something was there, but it pretty much meshed into her skin. And so it's amazing. She had a lot of them. So Sabrina, please come up here because without you and Hakeem, we wouldn't know Professor Spira, at least at that particular time. We would have eventually caught up. So she's going to tell you 2 minutes of her experience with Professor Spira. So please come on up, Sabrina. And she's one of the founders. Her and Bobby.
Thank you. Okay, 2 minutes. 2 minutes would be hard. But I'll do 2, I promise. Yeah, she's right. I was feeling itching for about a week after a 26-day fast.
Wow.
And I was like, why is my back itching and itching? And then I noticed stuff was coming off. I'm like, my moles. I used to get teased at school. Junior high and high, the guys would come up to me and flirt. Can I play connect the dots with your back? Because I had so many moles. But they actually started coming out. That was one of the detox symptoms. And then I started peeling my scalp back on another fast. And so this off and on fasting, which some of you know me, I'm taking my healing to another level. And this is another level. Off and on fasting, mucus-free and mucus-lean food in between. And yes, it's really getting deeper with my healing. So thanks for letting me share that.
Thank you.
And I told Bianca and Hakeem, I said, we got to get Professor Spira out here.
Yeah.
This stuff is powerful.
Yeah. And then I let Bobby's Spira, let's get him out of Spira. Bobby wants Spira.
Bianca gets what she wants. How could I turn her down?
Well, you just say angel. That's all. That's all. You're angel. Thank you.
And I'm happy to be able to meet him.
Yeah. So thank you so much. So thanks so much.
He's a good coach.
Yeah.
I have a question on the fasting. Was it a juice fast or was it like straight up just water fasting or what was that?
Fruit fasting, then juice fasting, then some water fasting, lemon juice fasting. You kind of go.
Kind of alternated?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll get to questions afterwards
Right.
too. That's a great question. So, but we'll get to questions because I need to introduce.
Yes.
I just wanted to at least acknowledge Sabrina. Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing him out here.
You're welcome. Thank you, Bobby.
Yes.
Roxy. Anyway. Okay, first of all, Professor Spira, he is an author, musician, and I got it, don't tell me. Okay. Ethnomusicologist. Let me hear you all say that. Ethnomusicologist. Hey, you got it. All right. Okay. We're going to be saying that one more time. So, okay. So, Professor Spira is an author, musician, and ethnomusicologist, founder of Mucus-Free Life, LLC, and the most sought-after expert on Arnold Ehret's mucusless diet healing system in the United States, Australia, and Great Britain. He has worked tirelessly to receive the works of Arnold Ehret and has helped thousands of people to learn how to transition toward a mucus-free lifestyle. He holds, this light is kind of messing up. Let me hold it like this. Okay, it's bleeding through. He holds a master's degrees in jazz, trombone, performance, and African American and African studies, as well as a PhD in musicology with a specialization in ethnomusicology. So we need to applaud him because he just got his PhD. So awesome, awesome. When he was a freshman in college, Spira met a jazz drummer named Willie Smart, also known as Brother Air. So you've seen him.
Okay.
Yeah, Brother Air.
Okay.
Who told him about Arnold Ehret's mucusless diet healing system. And within 6 months, he lost 110 pounds and overcame major ailments that plagued him since childhood. Since his transformation, he has worked tirelessly to revive Arnold Ehret's teachings and has helped thousands of people learn how to transition toward a mucus-free lifestyle. In 2014, Spira started Mucus-Free Life LLC, which currently publishes several books, including Professor Arnold Ehret, Mucusless Diet Healing System, annotated, revised, and edited by Professor Spira. Spira speaks, dialogues, and essays on the mucusless diet, Professor Arnold Ehret's rational fasting, definite cure of constipation, and thus speaketh the stomach. In the spring of 2016, he released the first audiobook format of his acclaimed annotated version of Arnold Ehret's mucusless diet and plans to release a revolutionary mucusless diet e-course this summer. He is also a webmaster of www.mucusfreelife.com. He facilitates popular public support groups for mucusless diet practitioners and produces educational videos about the mucusless diet on his YouTube channel. So please visit www.mucusfreelife.com for more information. So please help me welcome this phenomenal Dr. Spira.
Your help here, so let's clap with me.
Okay.
All right. Can I join the band?
Yeah, you are all in the band, in the mucus-free band.
That's right. That's right.
Next level band. So I am Professor Spira, and I practice something called the Mucusless Diet Healing System. Now you notice that I say practice. And for us, that's a significant term to use when we're in this realm of diet, where there's all these isms. There's raw foodism, there's veganism, there's fruitarianism, there's breatharianism, there's all of these, paleo dietism. I'm gonna throw an ism on it. There's all these isms, but what they end up doing is putting you in a box. Because you start to identify with this concept, and you want to wear that as sort of a badge of honor. But if you have any issues, then you feel like you're breaking some kind of law. You're going against this thing where it's like, oh well, I was raw for a couple years and it got real hard, and but I'm gonna be raw again. What we say within the mucusless diet healing system, all of those isms are within that one system, that one diet, because you can go periods of time where you're raw for a really long period of time. You can go periods of time where you're eating nothing but fruit and you would be considered a fruitarian. You go periods of time where you're fasting. You go periods of time where you're eating some mucus-forming foods. Maybe you're eating some processed vegan foods, some cooked mucus-free vegetables. All of these different levels are within the context of the mucusless diet, operative words, healing system. So I learned about the mucusless diet about, let's get the disclaimer over with. I'm not a medical practitioner. My doctorate is not in medicine. It is a doctorate of philosophy. But when you're talking about health, you don't need a degree to talk to other people and share information about health.
Right.
And that's all I'm doing, is just sharing some of my experiences. I've studied the experiences of a lot of other people, and I'm just kind of put it all together, and we're just talking about health. And so there's no diagnosis involved. I'm not claiming to cure anything, because I don't even really believe in the disease concept. I think that's a dispowering concept. If you want to deal with those, you have to deal with those with the medical doctor. But what we talk about is health. You can name stuff all these different names, but what we're talking about is, how do you heal yourself? How do you become healthy using natural means, natural food, fasting, things that you were born with that you didn't have to go and do all this study and that kind of thing. The healing is right at our fingertips. We just have to understand what to do. So, quick introduction. This is the first annotated and revised version of the mucusless diet healing system. Arnold Ehret wrote, or we could say that the original mucusless diet was compiled in around 1922. Arnold Ehret was born in the 1860s and in Germany. And this was right at the time when there was this, they call it, back to nature renaissance. A lot of the stuff that happened in America in the 60s was it was actually an outgrowth in a big part to what was going on in Europe in that time period. And it was interesting. A lot of people don't talk about this, but there's this dynamic of what happens in World War I. There's a lot of folks that come over that's doing this movement in Germany, and they come over and they go to Southern California, because that was considered to be the Eden of the West, and that's where Ehret went. And so there was a lot of folks on the white side of town that was dealing with the fruitarianism and healing and that stuff. But then you also had folks within the Rastafari movement and stuff also dealing with it. And of course, in this wonderful segregated society that we had and still kind of have to a large extent, because we haven't really dealt with that issue yet at all. Nobody's really analyzed that, and that's something I look forward to doing at some point. But as far as Arnold Ehret, the original mucusless diet, a lot of you are familiar with Dr. Sebi. It inspired him we'll talk a little bit about. There's a lot of things that we have different opinions on. From if you really go by the Mucusless Diet Healing System book and you look at Eric's definition of what is and isn't mucus forming, some of the value systems involved, it's different from Dr. Sebi. So I want you to be open-minded, go with me. Maybe I might talk about a food item that and say that maybe a particular food item is good to eat, but you're like, well, wait a minute, Dr. Sebi said that, like, but bear with me because this is different. This is a different way to think about this this whole process. So, and the reason I created the annotated version was when I read the original version, I was like, man, this is so brilliant. People need to know about this. But at the same time, there were some things that dated it that I thought was within the realm of an annotator or a reviser could go back and make certain editorial changes, and then also just like you would have an annotated Bible or an annotated piece of literature or something like that, where an author goes back and does this retroactive analysis. I thought, well, if any book deserves that kind of attention, Arnold Eric's Mucusless Diet Healing System certainly does.
Oh, okay, that's great.
And then Spira Speaks is a compilation of a lot of different case studies that I worked with, people that I worked with when I was earlier in me, kind of reaching out and helping people. I never sought out to help people heal themselves and all that kind of stuff. It was like I just started getting calls and I started getting emails of people asking me questions because I was just open about what I do. And I'm passionate about the subject and talking about it, and so then I started getting messages like, hey, how do you do this, how do you do that? And I noticed a lot of people had the same kind of questions, again, because of the book. There were certain things that didn't address. And, so I thought, well, when I was working with these people, I was like, one day I'll probably compile all of this information into a book and put it out. I thought I'd probably be in my 70s or 80s because I thought I'd be touring the world playing music. I didn't know that it was going to be my time to do this right now. But I listened to the universe, and this is the direction that it led me in. But so that's Spira Speaks. So as I mentioned, Arnold Eric, he came across this information. He was very sick. They called it Bright's disease, just kidney issues. And he was really on his deathbed, and he had a little bit of money. He wasn't coming from a poor European family. They were a little higher up on the let's say the food chain, the pus and mucus chain. So he had went to all of the greatest doctors in Europe, and nobody had anything for him. Nobody said, okay, well look, you can do this, or they couldn't heal him. So he started looking at alternative methods, and so there was all of these kind of vegetarianism was starting to grow, and there was these vegetarian retreats and fasting clinics, and this kind of thing was starting to happen. And he went to some of those and he got a little bit of relief, but it never really totally cured him. So one day he was to the point where he almost was just like, he was kind of ready to call it quits and he almost like commit suicide. So he just stopped eating. He's like, okay, I'm just gonna stop eating, and that's what we're gonna do. And to his amazement, within 2 weeks, he ultimately felt better than he had felt in years. And so he started to think, like, well, wait a minute, what if I was so in such pain and now I'm feeling better after 2 weeks of fasting, what's going on here? And so after that, he just studied, started working with people, and before he knew it, he had his own sanitarium where he was healing people all over Europe using what he was developing at the time with the Mucusless Diet Healing System, using those principles. So some of the sickest people were coming to him and able to get some relief from his methods. And like I said, he came over to America in the early 1900s and started working over here a little bit. In 1922, he he mysteriously died, and this is he was like about 56 years old, and nobody saw it happen. He had just given a lecture. He was starting to get, he was giving these sold out lectures. Everybody's paying $100 in 1922.
Wow.
That's like $1,000 today just to come see Professor Arnold there talk. And he was, at that time, he was actually giving a lecture called The Grape Cure. You know, and there's a book called The Grape Cure. I don't really promote it much because there's the author took some liberties with the diet. So, you know, but the principles of, you know, grape and grape juice fasting is something that is beneficial within the context of the mucusless diet. But he had just given that lecture, and there's all these different stories and stuff, but the story goes he was leaving, and maybe he had on some new shoes, you know, allegedly it's foggy and on these cobblestones, and what the story is that he tripped and fell like on the back of his head and died of a basal fracture. What a lot of us think that there's a lot of things don't add up with this, because the burgeoning and developing meat industry, the medical industry was getting started at this time. These industries were starting to really hit. They hated this guy. There's a some of the things he did, there's no reason that every person in medical science and dietary science, they should be talking about him. He's at the forefront of all of this whole vegan thing. That's why I say mucusless diet healing system is the original vegan diet, if you want to use the word vegan. Even though the word vegan wasn't invented until 1940s. But if you're going to talk about plant-based diet, mucusless diet healing system was the quintessential plant-based diet. But there was also the transitional element to it. And so so that's Arnold there, you know, really just a profound mind. And there's this old school tradition of a philosopher being more than just, you know, someone that sort of thinks like, wow, that's pretty heavy and deep. Like the old school philosophers were also the inventors. They were the scientists. They were the theologians. They were, you know, they studied everything that, you know, from spirituality to physics, you know, and everything in between. You know, the Leonardo da Vinci's of the world. You know, that tradition, and Aaron's coming out of that. So sometimes people say, oh, well, the mucusless diet is not really scientific, as if that really means anything in the way that we conceive of science, you know, in terms of like pop culture kind of science. But what ended up happening was, you know, Eric's work is, you know, being taken in the wrong, you know, kind of being misunderstood. And so that's, you know, one of the things I really want to get into today, and just his legacy. You know, this is just somebody that I think everybody should know about. You know, everybody should really know about his work. So this is a before and after of me. I probably have to put more on here. So that was me, like 280 pounds. These were taken a year apart. And I was just always kind of big. I mean, when I was real little, if you go back to some of the earliest pictures, there's a sort of a slenderness there, but I was kind of eating a lot and that kind of stuff, and so I soon got, you know, started getting kind of big, and I just became the big guy. You know, it's like I made fun of, and I went through that whole thing that folks a little bigger go through, you know, in school and that kind of thing. And I tried all kinds of stuff. You know, I tried little diets and stuff. Even in high school, I tried all kinds of stuff to lose weight, but I also wanted to feel better because I had terrible ailments. I had, you know, migraine headaches all the time, chronic bronchitis yearly. I would just get these terrible bouts of bronchitis, hemorrhoids. That's one. It's not particularly pleasant. And then allergies, you know, cold. I just thought that was normal because I had a mother that was very ill, and my mother actually died when I was in 6th grade, and the years preceding that, she was always in and out of the hospital. My aunt told me there was one year where she had the ambulance called for her like 100 times in 1 year. Whoa. So she was never at home very long. I was raised, mostly by my grandmother and my aunt. You know, and my grandmother died when I was in 4th grade, and that actually devastated me. That really changed my life. And then so 2 years later was when my mom died, and by that point it was, you know, oftentimes when young people lose somebody, they go in one of two directions. They either sort of become like the problem child and, you know, drop out of school and go and do drugs and that kind of stuff, or they become sort of like overachiever. So I was kind of that. So I just put I didn't even think about the emotional stuff. I kind of pushed everything down, and I just went into all of my activities. You know, so all sports and big into Boy Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout, and I'm you know, I just did all this stuff and was trying to get straight A's, and you know, so I just perfect attendance. I mean, and I would be sick going to school, you know, just because where most kids would have been like, I'm staying home. They had to force me to go home because I just had this on. It was my personal goal to have perfect attendance. I didn't want nobody to pat me on the back. That was something I was doing for me, just because once I get a goal, I kind of like, all right, I'm gonna do this, you know, just that kind of attitude. So, but I kept going to the doctors, and they kept giving me all this medicine, and I've been on pharmaceutical medicines really all my life up until I got into the diet. But especially when I was 7 years old, I think they started putting me on something called Celdane, which a couple years later they took off the market because it was like killing people. And so from Celdane I went to Allegra, which you probably heard about because they run. That was also the time they just started running these kind of insane ads, you know, starting to get you normalized to this, you know, where they have the ads where people are so happy. They're like, oh God, this drug is great. You know, I'm just going about my life, everything. And the guy in the background, and they use like they're like hypnosis dynamics and all kinds of stuff for that. So they sort of lull you in, and you're watching this. Wow, it's pretty, and you're hearing, you know, take this pill to be as happy as these people, and then all of a sudden at the end they go through, you know, if you have an erection that lasts more than 3 hours, see a physician. This could cause cramping. You could become suicidal. You could, it's like, is anybody hearing this? Like, when did this become normal? But that's what they did. They transitioned us into that, so I remember being young and seeing that, because they started, you know, I think Allegra might have been one of the first drugs that they even had ads like that for. And so I went through all those, and what I noticed was every time I went to the doctor, it was almost like I was kind of like a lab rat or something. Because I would go and they would say, well, how you feeling now? And it's like, well, it's okay, but if I didn't say that everything was absolutely perfect, then they say, well, try this, try something else. So then well, what about Zyrtec? Try this. Well, try Nasonex. You know, put the stuff up your nose. Do Nasonex and Allegra. You know, all that. So and I barely talk about it, but I used to get these bloody noses all the time. I think it was because of the Nasonex. Once I started doing that Nasonex combined with the Allegra, I mean, it was just messing up all it is up here. And what these drugs do is they suppress. They don't normally give you stuff that expectorates, to eliminate waste. That's what the Mucusless diet healing system is all about, is the removal and elimination of waste, and showing you how to therapeutically do it through diet and fasting, things like colon irrigation, enemas, and things like that, which we'll get into and talk about. So I'm gonna cut to the chase.
Whoa,
Good thing.
This is what's wrong with society. This is what's wrong with the world. This is what's wrong with the kids. This is what's wrong with the police that are shooting and beating our brothers and sisters. This is the problem right here. You can talk all like, well, we got social reform and we got education and all this kind of, you know, all this kind of stuff. Oh, we got to have money. You know, we got to get money. We got to, like, this first. This is what we got to deal with first. Then we can talk about economics. We can talk about, you know, we can talk about all those other subjects. This has to be the priority. This is what is in most of us, some variation of this, is what's in us right now in our intestines. Unless you're practicing Mucusless diet, or you do a fair amount of cleansing, and you might have gotten rid of a lot of this stuff. But this is, you know, some people call it mucoid plaque. It's this nasty jelly pus stuff that is in our intestines. And you know, so when there's a lot of people that do these cleanses and they'll say, oh, I did a 5-day cleanse and I feel so much better. And it's like, really, you know, you really think that you got rid of all of that in 5 days? Because I know I had an elimination that was basically like black tar came out. And that was a couple months into practicing the Mucusless diet, and I had just started doing enemas. So one thing that Eric suggests is for us to do enemas, and the thing that we added to it that a lot of us do is lemon juice enemas. So we take distilled water, lemon juice, warm it up, put it in the enema bag, and then perform the enema. Spira Speaks is actually the book you want to get if you want the step-by-step instructions on how to do lemon juice enema. As far as I know, that's the only book in the world that actually has those instructions. But so I was getting into it, and the key was the system, and we'll expound on this a little. This is kind of just a general overview, introduction to it. And the key was, it wasn't that I was just doing one thing. I wasn't just doing enemas and then not changing my diet, or I wasn't just changing my diet and not doing the enemas, or I wasn't just doing the enemas and changing my diet but not incorporating fasting systematically into it. So that is what we mean by system. It's not just one thing. It's not just about knowing a list of foods, like, okay, this is okay to eat, or it's not okay to just, well, I'm going to just go a few days and not eat something or whatever. It's a really comprehensive system. When you start to line all of the pieces up, this kind of stuff will come out of you, and you'll start to see this coming out. And so, while we're talking about enemas, I brought a little show and tell. This isn't the one. I'm not using this one. This is just one that hasn't been used. But yeah, so this is what it looks like. It's the enema bag, and this is a little cord thing. You put that in there, and so and I know there's a lot of people that get kind of squeamish, and they're like, oh no, I don't know. Enemas, and there's some guys that kind of like, nah, man. I eat some fruit, but I ain't gonna do that. So, but my thing is, what if this could prevent you from? Have you ever seen the people? And maybe there's some folks in here. You could be people in here, this room, or family members or whatever. But with my mom, they cut her from here down here, and when they did the double bypass surgery. And I was young, and they amputated. She amputated both her legs, and then because she had gangrene in her feet. I should have some of those like gangrene feet pictures on here, but and then they cut her down, and then so that image is seared in my head of just like all these huge stitches that's like keeping her together. So what's more radical? A little bit of warm distilled water and lemon juice with this, or to be cut on?
Yeah, right.
Okay, I got
and so that's the perspective that the brothers have to understand when we go through this process of like, okay, let's do it. So several a year or two ago now, but she was really skinny, but she started getting stuff that looked like that coming out, and then she kept doing the enemas, and I actually added a little bit of I probably won't talk a whole lot about herbs here, because that's kind of the focus needs to be on diet, but when the time is necessary, I will suggest some herbs and formulas and things like that. But put a little parasite formula in there, had the enemas going, and she went days of just like pounds of stuff like that coming out of her.
And she was real thin, right?
And she was real thin, yeah. So it was like, where are they coming from? But when we say 32 feet of impacted intestines, I mean, we really. That's what I'm gonna start bringing to lectures. I need like a string or something to demonstrate, from like that wall all the way over to about that wall, there is a pipe going through you that's all, you know, sort of arranged and tied up. So again, I bring you back to the idea of you're going to do a 5-day or even a 20-day cleanse, and you're going to, and if you're impacted, because not only does the edges around is going to, you know, have the grime and all the little slime, then you have some people that's just totally impacted. You know, they're totally constipated. So for 32 feet of totally of all of this waste, all 32 feet, you're going to take care of that, you know, in a cleanse, in a 21-day fast or a cleanse. No, this is a lifestyle change that we have to make if we're going to be successful. We're going to start cleaning ourselves up and you know, cleaning our community up. You know, this has to be the first priority. You know, we have to take this, you know, really seriously. So this is actually my picture. That's mine. Like some of these come from. There's a book called by Bernard Jensen, the Tissue Cleansing book. Yeah, it's some of those and come out of that, and then you can find these online. But that one's mine. That was one that I got. I was like, let me take a picture of this. This is interesting.
So is that mucus?
Yeah, that came out of me. Yeah, and when I was doing enema, yeah. So I did. So sometimes you know you do enema and the water will kind of come out and be filtered, and then you'll feel some kind of release. And you look in the toilet and you're like, what is that? You know, I've seen stuff that I thought was gonna like pop out the toilet and say hi to me or something. What is that? You know, so that is some of that. You know, and you know, Eric said that disease is a stench. So we're not supposed to smell like we smell. I mean, we shouldn't have to put on all kinds of, you know, stuff to make it. We should just smell like flowers, not have to put on all kinds of things and lotions and all this kind of stuff to put, you know, and to smell like that. And I think there's something in us deep psychologically to why we even like that, to why we even want to do that to ourselves, and that attracts you know, our brothers and sisters to us, because, oh, you smell kind of good, you know, because that's reminding us of how we actually should smell, you know, the cleaner variations of it. And so you start to see all of this, this putrid, nasty stuff coming out, and when it does, then it's like celebrate. That's you got something. That's one more day that you can add to your life of that's not going to be in you, making you more and more toxic. And so Aaron said this idea of how does it look inside of a colon. And he gave this this thing that said that it looks like a filthy stove, like the inside. And those old school stoves. This is kind of going back, but those old school stoves where you would have to burn coal or burn whatever. Over time, you would start to get this grime that would build up, and then you would have to clean that out, or the smoke isn't going to leave. Same thing happens in your kitchen. Every once in a while, you start getting the sink backed up, then you go and you get you some Drano or whatever it is, you put that in there, and then it kind of breaks the stuff up and flushes it out. That's essentially what the Mucusless diet is, sort of a human Drano, or I should say really the lemon juice and lemon enema. That's like human Drano. It's just, you loosen up all of this waste that's in the length of the GI tract, start to clean it up. And we have to start thinking of things more holistically. Instead of thinking about like, we always want to disassociate ourselves from different parts of us. Like, well, that's like my problem's in my foot. That's not me. That's just my foot. Or like my problem's down here. It's like, no, you're all one. And so and I don't mean to be nasty, but think about it. We're one long continuous tube. So your tongue and your throat is connected to your colon. It's one tube. It's not separate things. Right. The way that they teach it in Western society is to segment everything, to say like it's not part of us. Like, okay, that's to put it over there because culturally you're disgusted with it and don't want to associate with it. But what the Mucusless diet does, it gets you to be real intimate with yourself and with being really honest about where you are. You know, being honest with yourself. You look in the mirror and be like, okay, like this is, I am what I am. Don't be hard on yourself. So I tell all the time, people I work with, don't be hard on yourself. But we had to shift our attitude in terms of when it's in our ability to make a change, or the things that we can control, we have to make those changes. And you know, I like to talk a lot about social dynamics, because I've said in the past, the #1 reason that people, in my opinion, fail practicing the Mucusless diet healing system is because of social dynamics. There's all this peer pressure and family issues and everybody, you know, crabs in a barrel dynamic, because all of a sudden you found this information, like, hey, check this out, like I've been doing this for a month, I feel so much better, and then all of a sudden, and you're trying to take this to a loved one that you want to, you know, you want them to embrace you, and then even maybe check it out because just because you said, hey, check this out, because you wouldn't recommend something bad to them, but then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they smack you down. And you know, it really can say some things that hurt you, really hurt your feelings, because the family knows how to push your buttons, and so they have this reaction, and you don't even know where it's coming from. But that gets into how addictive mucus and pus forming foods are. It's, for us, it is the ultimate gateway drug. It's the fundamental drug. And we live in a society that's based on that drug, a pus and mucus based society, where that's the most important thing. There's almost no social function that doesn't feature pus and mucus.
Right. That's right.
You know, no family. What's the last family gathering where you just had a tray of fruit there, you know, and someone was juicing something? You know, and it's the way it's constructed is, because that addiction is so deep, it enables everybody. You know, it's a society of enablers of pus and mucus eating, and so as long as we don't attack that and say, okay, well that's, you know, that's not good, because I tell you, you know, some of the craziest responses that I've ever gotten was when if I critique raw foodists that have become raw, or their definition of raw is very different from mine, actually. I don't get into, you know, if you're gonna dehydrate something, you've changed it, you know, or if you know, blend it and all this kind of stuff, you might not have, like, you know, cooked it or what, you know, technically, but it's, to me, that's still processed. That don't mean that you can't use it on a transition. It's just, to me, that's not raw. Raw is a piece of celery or yeah, an apple, you know, you just eat it. But that's, you know, to me, that's what the raw really is. But yeah. Okay, so I'll kind of go by this one quick. So this, you know, medical diagnosis, this kind of goes to a different lesson actually, but we talked about before, these titles that we give to all of these different ailments. You know, one of the things when I'm working with somebody, you know, you can tell me what the doctor said if you want to. You know, you can say, well, this is the thing that they said I have, or this is what's going on. And I don't just like reject that. I look at that and say, okay, well, and what are the symptoms that are associated with that? So we really have to start looking at symptoms. What are we, you know, what are we going through in terms of, you know, the way you feel? Because a lot of people say, like, well, you know, I got diabetes, I got this, and it's like, okay, but so what do you experience? It's like, well, when I eat certain things, I feel like this. It's like, okay, well, let's start there. So instead of feeling imprisoned by this word that somebody told you you have something, and you can believe them or not believe them, you know, based on what you feel. But if you look at, it's like, okay, well, you know, so why do you feel like that? What is the foundation of that? With the Mucusless diet healing system, we're saying that in order to overcome whatever those ailments are, we're going to have to go through a certain kind of healing process that entails getting rid of mucus-forming foods, you know, for a period of time, and going through this cleansing with the, the enemas and fasting. And fasting being the omnipotent healing modality for animal life. Naturopathy is the word that a lot of people use when they're talking about natural healing, and there's some issues. A lot of Eric really was the foundation of real naturopathy, but a lot Eric doesn't really deal with and believe in these nutrition theories, and this is the one place where almost everybody they're like, what? They can't conceive that. I mean, I'll talk to some of the heaviest, those heavy guys. It's like, wow, this is a really brilliant heavy person. But then I start talking about, there's no such thing as nutrition, right? It's just a socially constructed idea that has like the sort of scientific things, and so you can try to fit other things into it, but it doesn't really work. They want to try to use a science that was based on assuming that pus and mucus eating is normal, and say, based on I'm getting everything I need from the vegetable, all this kind of stuff. So what Eric does is he just rejects that entire thing entirely, and instead of worrying about not getting something, because this is what is kind of wrong with this whole framework, if you think about it. So there's a lot of people that worry about, well, what if I don't get this, or I need this, and yet they're they're overweight and they got a lot of issues and that kind of thing. But it's like, well, what about thinking, what don't you need? What don't you need to eat? And what could you eat that will help you eliminate? That will help the body eliminate. So that's what we focus on. We focus, instead of focusing on all these equations and all the mathematics. Again, if you're into that and that's what you want to do, fine. But we look at what are the foods that aid the body in eliminating waste. Because where we like to really focus is the breath, which is the foundation of this whole thing. So, now I'm jumping ahead, kind of way ahead. Vitality equals power minus obstruction. Let's see. Let's get through this. All right. So now we're getting to this is kind of back to basics here. Lesson 1. Every disease is constipation. So that's how Arnold Ehret starts Mucusless diet. Every disease, no matter what name it is known by medical science, is constipation. Now he's not just talking about bowel constipation. He's talking about cellular constipation. Constipation from head to toe of the entire body. The entire tissue system, the lymphatic system. Things are not functioning and moving in the way that they would if you were on a more natural diet. And so what starts to happen is these mucus-forming foods, which I probably should do that. I should probably say, tell me some foods that are mucus-forming. Tell me some mucus-forming foods.
Sugar, nuts, meat, dairy.
Dairy. Well, you're
avocado.
Corn.
Avocado, yes. We talked about that. The raw food. That's what I didn't even. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. That's where the raw foodists hate me. I'm like, I'm on their most wanted list, dead or alive. He's telling me that avocados are mucus forming. This guy's crazy. So what you were actually naming were pus forming foods. If you go further to analyze the distinction between pus forming and mucus forming. Plant-based mucus formers are mucus formers. They form mucus, so that's things that are starchy. So starchy vegetables, that kind of thing. Some of those things are what we're going to use to transition, because we use mucus to transition off of mucus. You just use mucus that's not as bad. So instead of definitely the pus, you get off of that. So the pus is meat form, the meats and the dairy, the eggs and the meat and the fish is pus forming.
Okay, can you take questions now or take them after your lecture?
I mean, if you got a question, go ahead.
Can you define pus and define mucus? I mean, I kind of see them the same. But
Yeah, pus derives from blood, like blood-borne. You know, something that had blood going through it, and that blood and that tissue decays. As soon as an animal dies, that blood and tissue decays into this very concentrated, viscous, slimy substance that we have called pus by definition. So pus has to do with blood being involved in the creation of whatever the food item is, and that's why dairy is pus forming, and the cheeses and all that kind of stuff is pus forming. Where something that's just mucus forming would be your grains and your starches and the vegetable fats, and that's what the avocado and that kind of thing. Things that turn slimy, that still will turn slimy. So essentially, one way where you know if something is mucus forming or not is when you eat it, and where we're doing enemas and that kind of stuff, so we can kind of see, and you can see when a salad comes out of you, and that's all you had was a salad, or some fruit comes out of you, it's a lot different than when something's coming out of you like an avocado that's slimy, and you can tell, it smells different, it comes out, they're totally different. Other ways that you can, if you want to do that type of test, Eric talks about an interesting way to look at it, where if you were to take grapes or some kind of fruit and say cook that in a pan over to the side for about 30 minutes, and you take some meat or take an avocado or take something that's mucus forming and put that in a pan and just cook it for 30 seconds, you're not going to eat it, and then look at it, and you will notice that the fruit item or the mucus-free vegetable item, especially fruit particular, will cook down into like a syrup. And it's not slimy, it's not acid forming, it's just sort of this fruit kind of syrup. Whereas if you do that to a mucus forming item, it turns into this really nasty, viscous, sticky, when the cooked glue, cooked rice is made for bookbinders glue. So there's not a huge difference between cooking rice down into glue and putting rice into your body where your body's 98 degrees and it's just going to sit again 32 feet. It has to travel from over there to over there, and it's sticky. How far do you think that rice is going to go?
Very far.
It didn't go that far, but watermelon's going to go. Grapes are going to move on down. So that's essentially the difference there in pus and mucus forming foods. And really the whole body can be viewed, as Eric says, as a system of pipes. So we have the intestines, our GI tract is a pipe. Our blood vessels are pipes. Our lymph vessels are pipes. So you can sort of look at the body as a system of pipes, and when that system is obstructed in some way and the energy can't move, then we start to have pain and suffering and ailments, which we call disease. And the original idea of disease meant, dis-ease, not feeling well. And so that is the foundation. When something can't move, and on top of that, the other thing about mucus, pus-forming foods is all pus and mucus-forming foods are acid-forming foods, ultimately. And they turn into acids inside your body when they're uneliminated. And the body does its best to try and put the stuff aside and tuck it away so it doesn't harm you. It's like, well, here's all this acid, all this stuff that if it got into your bloodstream, or some of this toxic waste, if it just hit you all at once, it could kill you. So let's tuck it away over in this area, this tissue system, or over here by this gland or organ. And if there is a particular point where there's a lot of obstruction, then you could have a lot of problems with that area of your body. And so if you can imagine something that turns to this kind of acid, what does acid do? There are only two sides of chemistry. You have the acidic side and the alkaline side. You know, there's two different kinds of foods. You know, there's acid-forming foods and there's alkaline food. And so if you have these acids that are getting, and your body is kind of becoming permeated with it, it will start to break down your body from the inside out. And so, some people, it's the kidneys because they're kidney weakness, and all those acids there. Some people, it might be someplace else, maybe be up near a thyroid, it'd be, your pancreas, all the, those major organs. Just think about putting a bunch of acid on an organ, right? It's soft tissue, it's gonna destroy it. And so that's what we're doing ourselves when we're eating these, what ultimately becomes acid-forming items in our body. It just tears us apart from the inside out. So Aaron said in Mucusless diet that everybody has, most people not practicing Mucusless diet have over 10 pounds of uneliminated feces in the bowels, because again we got the 32 feet, that continually poison the body. But today, it's not uncommon for people to have 15 to 20 pounds of just this uneliminated waste, and we have normalized it to the point where we're carrying it around with us, and it's just like, oh, well, this is it's become just normal to just have all of this waste. As Aaron says, we're walking cesspools. We're walking cesspools of filth, and again, that's part of that, like that tough love of we gotta look, because that's not. I'm not saying that when you take personal or anything, because I put myself in that. I'm trying to get myself together. I'm trying to clean myself up, and it's a lifelong thing. And that's what said, well, you've been practicing for all those years, aren't you clean yet? I'm like, you understand what we've done to ourselves as a so-called human species? I don't even think we can give ourselves that level, human. We're somewhere in between, the closest animal and human, because we're eating ourselves down into the animal kingdom, and that gets into, maybe we'll get to that. That's a second half discussion. That's some of the little heavier concepts here, but so I tell people, be patient. The Mucusless diet will teach you how to be patient, because this isn't a quick fix. This isn't, okay, I'm gonna lose some weight. This is about regenerating your bloodstream to the point where, if you have children and your children have children, but if you have your Mucusless diet practitioner has a child, and then that child has a child, and you have 2 or 3 generations of Mucusless diet practitioners, now you're talking about an entirely different humanity. Really imagine, but for some reason everybody wants it to be about them. They want to do it like, well, I want to do it now. I'm gonna be fruitarian and I'm gonna do this. It's like, what about the legacy? We got to shift our vision and our view, and to understand that really ain't even about us. We got to get ourselves together so that we can have something of value to give to the next generation and the next generation, because what's happening is we're not getting healthier. Look at how young the kids are getting sick. I'm having folks come to me that's in their early 20s, even late teens, going through chronic illness that used to not really hit folks until they was in their 60s, exactly, and 70s, and so it's not getting better. We're a carbon copy of our parents, so we can't eat like and live like our parents and expect to live as long as they lived, because we're weaker physiologically, and so because a lot of people say, well, my mom is, she's 98 years old and she smoked every day, and she ate chitlins and grits every day. I'm glad she's here, but and she had really strong constitution, so imagine if she would have been eating a natural diet. We'd be talking to her at her 180, asking about how was things back in how you meet Harriet Tubman, that kind of thing, yeah. So we got to shift our thinking, and when people say that again, that's that response, that's that addiction to, you know, mucus-forming foods, and you try to defend yourself and say and rationalize why you're gonna do something, and so you know, so I understand that, and you say, okay, yes, but there's a lot. You notice you get into this, you do that a lot. You're talking to people, it's like, yes, but. So we already kind of said this, every sick person has a mucus clog system from unnatural food substances accumulated from childhood on. To define unnatural food substances, foods that cause mucus and pus, you know, pus and mucus forming foods, you know, that are unnatural for the human species. You know, there's different species that maybe they're more transitioned physiologically and designed to where they can eat those things. And now you can go on, even carnivores can transition into higher levels of diet, because I've seen it. You know, I've known people that have had cats and things, and they start transitioning it into like eating fruits and vegetables. A friend of mine had a cat and was transitioning, it was eating all this fruit and vegetables. It started growing a mane. You know, it's a cat, and so there's a lot, you know, there's a lot here that we have to get into, you know, as far as the potentials of where this thing can be taken that we might not have thought of on our own. And so the idea of Eric's diet, compensation action, the mucus theory, you know, you have forming foods even in the very beginning. If you're having trouble getting off of meat, I can tell you a number of things to eat that are better, or that are physiologically better than going to the regular cheese or going to the regular meat product or whatever. There's things even in the pus realm that's better to eat, but we don't want to stay there too long. We want to keep moving. Now, I took a lot longer than a lot of people to sort of get totally plant-based. A lot of people I work with, they become plant-based almost immediately, or they're plant-based, you know, once they're like, I'm vegan now, you know. But I wanted to make it, you know, make sure it was permanent. I was coming from being a total glutton. I was a very, you know, just overeater of everything. I used to go and get 2 footlongs with chili and cheese, a cheeseburger, and a root beer float, like in the same meal, like once a week at the root beer float or the root beer stand down where I was living at, and so I was coming from that. So, you know, it took me about 6 months to totally get off of all meat products, and I, again, I wasn't hard on myself, but I just stayed with the system. And what started to happen was my body, my physiology changed to the point where it became impossible for me to eat the things that I wasn't supposed to eat, because it was too painful. You know, so I go back, the last time that I ever had a cheeseburger, I'd been practicing a diet about 3 months or something, and I'd started feeling so much better, and I was like, oh wow, yeah. And then I went out to eat with it was the drummer of a famous jazz musician, Ahmad Jamal. He was in town, and I got to meet Ahmad and hang with him, and I was hanging with his drummer, and we went out to eat, and I hadn't had a cheeseburger in a long time, and that was something that I used to eat a lot. And so something made me, at the restaurant, you're like, yeah, go ahead, let me do this. And you rationalize it. I was like, I've been good. I deserve it. I've done hard work. And so ate that burger. And I mean, more than just pain. You know, I had, you know, severe pain in my stomach and stuff. I could feel like a spiritual shift, you know, like this impending doom internally, because I had gotten away from the meat foods. And what we don't realize, because and I could just, you know, I could start getting into all the, you know, if you start just thinking about the slaughterhouses and stuff. Maybe I should make a little bit of that a part of my presentation, but if you watch some of those videos, all of that that fear and that adrenaline and those hormones and the fight or flight and all that those animals are going through when they're being slaughtered, you are becoming one with that.
Right.
You know, when you eat the dead animal flesh. And I didn't realize that at the time, and I've never read that in the book. I experienced that because I've been off of it for a period of time. When I went back, it was like I felt it, and I realized, like, oh, what have I done? You know, this is not the direction. You know, and so after that, I never had another cheeseburger ever again, and just got, you know, just doubled down and got even more serious with the Mucusless diet. So Mucusless diet consists of raw and cooked fruits, starchless vegetables, and cooked or raw, mostly kind of green leaf vegetables. So you know, we can get a little bit into some of the food items that I have on my website. I have a list of transitional food items. I think it's a good list because it incorporates both mucus-less foods and mucus-forming foods that can be used on the transition. Because a lot of people look at my mucus-forming foods list and they get mad at me because they're like, oh, there's nothing left to eat. It's like, but did you read the part at the top where I say this is not a do not eat list? There's some things on here that I would say, you know, do not eat. But then there's other things on here that are mucus forming that are perfectly fine to use for the transition. And so that becomes the art of what we do. You know, I like to look at the Mucusless diet healing system as an art form, because, you know, everybody wants to say, oh, well, it's not science and all this. Well, this ain't about, this is about art. Because in the same way as an artist, if I wanted to be able to, when I was learning how to play the trombone, you know, I couldn't start off playing Giant Steps. You know, John Coltrane's Giant Steps was his, you know, like really hard song to play, jazz song. I had to work up to that, and I had to sort of slowly use, you know, basic principles before I could get to the point where I could really play a solo on a song like that. And physiologically, it's the same thing. You know, you kind of can take these incremental changes and steps, but every time you make a step, you want it to really be strong and permanent. You know, you want it to, like, all right, cool, I made that step. It's like, cool, yeah, you know. And so, and what we'll get into is, you know, the food combining. You know, so much of this diet is not about what are the right foods and the wrong foods to eat, but it's about how do you eat those foods. You know, how do you have your meals throughout the day? How do you combine the foods? How do you combine and integrate fasting with eating, or the colon irrigation with eating? When you put all of those different tools together in the right order, they become very, very powerful. You know, and that is really the foundation of this Mucusless diet. Why it's so unlike everything else that's out there. I mean, I never really hear until there's what's been happening more frequently is I come across someone's YouTube and they'll be talking about, like, stuff, they'll almost be quoting me, but they're not giving me credit. You know, they'll be saying stuff like, man, this person watches my videos, but they don't want to give a shout out or nothing, you know. Come on, man. Because I always, when I say something, I always give props to if it's Aaron said it or Brother Air or, you know, whatever. Just that's, you know, the collegial thing to do. But I'm still happy the information's out there, so I don't get, you know, I'm mad about it, but it's just interesting. It's just interesting that happened. But that's the thing, you know. And there's really nobody else that's out there that's talking about this the way we're talking about it in terms of transition, and that being, you know, so important. That's basically what I just said. Yeah, so the healing system, combination of individually advised long or short-term fasts, progressively changing menus toward non-mucus forming foods. So just methodologically, that's what we're dealing with. Oftentimes you'll hear us say things like understanding the principles of the Mucusless diet, and that's what we're getting into. You know, fasting a certain way is that would be like a principle. Eating, you know, eating 2 meals a day instead of 3 or 4, and eating them kind of at the right time, you know, that becomes a principle, or just sort of an overview. Now, if you don't do it perfect, does that mean you're not doing the diet? No, because this is not like an all or nothing kind of thing where it's like, oh man, I'm not being perfect, so I'm not really practicing the diet. Because I get people oftentimes that tell me that, they're like, well, you know, I'm not really, you know, I'm trying, I'm not really mucusless yet. It's like, I mean, I'm not totally mucusless yet. You know, I still will have some mucus forming items. This is not that type of thing where you have to like you know, it's like all or nothing. You know, it's the really long-term kind of strategy and transition. So one thing that I'll say is, as we go on today and tomorrow, you're just really, you know, keep an open mind. And I think most of you are, you know, open-minded people, because there's so much stuff that's coming from all of this, you know, these different places that are informing us of things that we're challenging, and we're saying we're going all the way back. Go back to the history of a lot of these theories that are, because sometimes I get kind of, let's say frustrated, but just, I guess frustrated would be the word. You know, I see some of the brothers and sisters that are, you know, talking health, and they also are, you know, talking Africa, and they got the consciousness going. But then they are starting to use words that's not coming from Africa. The word nutrition, that didn't come from Africa. The word protein was certainly not invented in Africa, and and this kind of thing. That's not part of anybody's heritage except for Western European dietetic medical theories. And I talk to dietitians oftentimes, and I'm like, well, do you know the history of the protein theory? And no, they don't teach them that. They don't teach them about the way that dogs were. This guy was starving dogs, and Francois Magendie was doing all these sadistic experiments on dogs, which they still do to this day. Rats, doing all kinds of. That's another side of this thing, because that's so hidden for most people. I mean, they're doing crazy abuses on animals in the name of science, in the name of nutrition. It's like, well, if I put a hole in this animal and I mess around with its insides. I did a video on cow holes, because I didn't even know that was a thing. And then I saw a video where someone was putting their arm. They had cut a hole in a cow, and they would they put a top on it, like a little sewer lid. Like, are we serious? Is this what is going on? But that is the result of, that's what I'm talking about when I say pus and mucus culture, where that kind of thing is happening and normalized, and people aren't outraged by it, or not. They're like, well, wait a minute, we got to change all that up, because, and even on that video, the people that were trying to defend it, they were like, oh no, that's good for the animal, because if it's sick, then they can do this. Like, no, back up. Because first of all, we shouldn't have these animals all caged up and all that kind of stuff. Bring a dog in our house and a cat. What's the difference between a dog and a cow and the pigs and all this kind of stuff? We're just socialized. We're socialized into thinking that that's what we're supposed to eat. We're socialized into just sort of believing in these concepts, because everybody's always like, well, what do you do to get your protein? Well, what school did you go to really examine and understand the science of protein? Because nobody ages, they're just taking these concepts because that's what's been drilled into us to believe. That, and then on top of that, we've had industries, food industries, that have capitalized on that to basically be terrorists, to scare us, to fearmonger and say, oh, if you don't use these pills, you don't use these vitamins, if you don't get this, then you're going to die. You're that. And they got, so that's where it gets you so. It's an interesting combination, because on one hand you have the addiction to the food, and then on the other hand, you sort of have this fear that is pushing you to eat the food. And so it's like this, it becomes this ultimate, like I said, the enabling, the enabling society that's making it possible for you to really eat like that and to feel comfortable with that and not think about it. One thing I always encourage people when you start down this path, first of all, be ready to have everything change. The way that you see the world. If you're not ready for that, then don't mess with this, because I'm telling you, and I can't emphasize enough, the way you see the world will profoundly change. The energy and the people around you will change, and that just is a part of this path. And so you gotta be ready for that kind of change, because there's a lot of people, and some of the most, when I started kind of promoting the diet years ago, I was way more intense than I am now. I've mellowed out a little bit. But I was scared. I'll give you the example of the way I came across, and I thought people could handle it. I learned that it wasn't 2000, the 2000s wasn't time for that. I sort of like the way I came across would have been like if Huey P. Newton or Malcolm X was practicing the Mucusless diet and telling you about it. So I would go into the community and I was hitting people, I used to have these like the rap songs that had, I won't do it now because it did have a lot of cussing and stuff, but I go to some of the hardest cats on the streets and I'm talking about this subject from that perspective, and I'm seeing some of these real hard cats kind of, like kind of almost cower and stuff, and so I noticed it was kind of overwhelming that the brothers and sisters, because the vitality in the community is fading. So we can't, that kind of energy that people want to try to plug into from the 60s and from the 70s, can't really handle it, and especially when you bring it into the realm of diet and you start to apply that same kind of revolutionary energy there, it challenges a lot of the most hardcore people.
Okay, I wanted to ask because I want a Q&A before we take a break.
Yeah, we could probably start at this point.
Okay, Sabrina had her hand.
Yeah, Sabrina.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment, really. Well, kind of a question. You know how you talked about Aaron's death, the way he died? Mm-hmm. I've been reading lately, there's been a number of naturopaths.
That's right.
Yeah, they've had that on Capital Public Radio, National Public Radio, Coast to Coast Radio, talking about all these healers that are dying, being killed mysteriously, or dying mysteriously, disappearing and found dead.
About 7 or 9.
Yeah, they've named about 7 or 9 in the last couple, 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, they died in a couple of months of each other.
Yeah, you're right. It's been
they died,
less than 2 years.
Yeah.
So it's probably the same kind of thing. It probably started with Eric.
And it's been happening.
It's picked up momentum.
Exactly. And what's happening now is because of the modern social media and the YouTube and that kind of stuff, it's like they can't kill it now because they can't take one person or a couple people and really shut it down because it's out now. It's like the information's out there. Something happens to me, that's why I put the books out. All this stuff is out there. It's like the information is out and people know about it, so it's too late for them. The people, the super constipated people, that want to, hold humanity back. You think of, I did this one time, sort of as a thought experiment, but calculate if there's 15 to 20 pounds of uneliminated feces in everybody. This should be an SAT question. How many pounds of waste is in a joint congressional hearing? Bring everybody together and then let's do that kind of math, because we have pus and mucus is running the show, and this is one thing where the filthiest of us are the ones that are in these positions of power. Because when you start to get cleaner, you're not interested in that kind of, you're not stimulated to want that. You don't want to run people's lives and then control people and feel, oh, I'm important. Like just to have that kind of, that's coming from a real pus, meat thing, a real kind of thing. And so that is something that we have to, really start addressing. Like I was talking about earlier with the slime, the politicians, the police, everybody that's doing anything that's on that just, corrupt side of things is coming out of a pus and mucus dynamic. A while back, I worked with a police officer that called me and he took consultations with me, and just listening to him, it was totally. I mean, he was just so mad about what's going on in the police and in the corruption, because he used to run kind of a small little thing, and it was like a total different thing. They were using like spiritual principles and all kinds of stuff, like this real kind of alternative thing, and then there was nobody was getting beat. Nobody was. It was like a real peaceful kind of thing. Peace officers. You go back far enough where they say, cop, consciousness on patrol. Really, the police or a cop should be somebody who just has such a presence to them that when they come into into contact with somebody doing something that they're not supposed to do, then that just makes them, it's like, okay, the adults are here, rides up, they have that presence. Right. You don't need a gun. You ain't supposed to have a gun to, to get people to, that kind of thing. But that's where we're at, But yeah, more questions.
I think.
Yeah.
Can you go over that?
I like to do things with dogs. They like to, at least they used to. I don't know if they still do, but this was another set of experiments on dogs where they were, starving dogs, and they tried to make it anemic. So they forced it to become anemic by not feeding it anything and that kind of stuff. And when they would do kind of basically these bloodletting experiments, and so they were trying to see a difference. And there was a dog that I had to brush up on the that's a while back when I was really reading that and into that, but they had given one dog some liver, and so coming out of more testing and whatever they did, but coming out of that, they sort of developed this theory, this B12 concept came out of that. Like, okay, well, this element that was in there is what helped the dog be able to not bleed like it was, and not be deficient, that kind of thing. So the subject of deficiencies, what we do is let's look at the functioning of the organs and the glands, because when we're unobstructed and things are functioning as they should, then those kinds of things aren't an issue. If you're eating fruits and vegetables and you're eliminating, that's why, to me, we just look at it differently. We look at it like, okay, you're fatigued, you're going through something, like, oh man. Instead of looking at it like, well, maybe you need to eat something else, we're saying, go lay down for a couple of days, fast, do some enemas, and then and allow your body to push out whatever that is in the way, and then come back from that. And so that's kind of essentially this idea of again, back to the nutrition theories and all that kind of stuff. We just basically are like, look, let's check out the diet. Let's see what happens when we really take the diet to a certain level.
Right, because in your book you had said they gave the dog starches, and then another set of dogs nothing, and the ones that had the starches seemed to like live longer. But it wasn't that; it was slowing the process down of them.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Eliminating.
Well, yeah, and that was actually, and both of those, the protein experiments and the B12 experiments are sort of similar.
Oh.
And I know the protein experiment was the one where, yeah, it wasn't a bloodletting experiment with them, but the one they gave just water, and the other they gave, like, yeah, water and some kind of little starchy stuff or something. And that dog lived longer than the dog that had just water. And so they deduced that this concept of protein, which the word was invented by a chemist named Mulder in the 1930s, they reasoned that, okay, this, and the word pro, first, teen meaning principle, so even though they didn't maintain that, the word is still the word, you know, so they came up with this idea that protein is the first principle to life. I mean, how addicted to pus-forming foods you have to be to say that's the first principle to life, then what is air?
Right.
You know, if dead carcass is the first principle, then what about air, you know?
Yeah.
Is it true that you get protein from air?
Nitrogen, that's what we have deduced, or that's what a lot of us kind of believe, that in a perfectly clean body, we would get whatever we need from the air, you know, be able to process, you know, and chemically change, you know, get the nitrogenous substance out of the air. And yeah, so there's a lot of mucusless diet practitioners believe that. Yeah.
Could it have been genetically that the dogs that died first was probably, maybe genetically was meant to die first?
Well,
I mean, we're talking about two different dogs doing this experiment. But how do we know how much longer one dog was going to live versus the other dog? If they would have been done the same, if they'd have used the same concept.
Well,
the dogs died at the same time.
Well, I mean, I mean, any experiment like that, you could, you know, say that. But I think they were the same, like roughly the same age and that kind of thing, where it wasn't going to be like if they had just fed the dogs normal. Probably, you know, you never know, you know, but probably, likely, that wouldn't happen. But the point that I think that I didn't yet really make, that I think Bo was wanting me to make, is that they were saying that the dog lived, the one that drank the stuff that had something in it, that dog lived because it got the nutrition it needed. Where we would look at that and say the dog didn't live because it got this nutrition that it needed and this other one didn't. It lived because it slowed its elimination down using the substance. That substance that was in that water slowed down the elimination. So if every one of us in here started to fast today and we just, okay, we're not going to eat anything for the next couple of days, you will feel like if you get past the hunger, because that's not even actually real hunger what you experience, because real hunger is like in the mouth, and that happens like, you know, if you are not clean, you know, and you go you know, a long period of time but without eating. But if you were to just fast, you would start to, you know, really see your body kind of you know, start to you know, what's the word, kind of come in on itself and start to squeeze stuff out. And if you were clean enough, then it would squeeze out, and then it would come back, and you would be fine. But because of how filthy we are, we have to intermittently stop that process and help the body eliminate that stuff. So when you fast, your body starts to kind of squeeze in, and you can imagine it squeezing out this toxic waste, and it starts getting in your system. But then you need a neutralizer. You need to put some